Hello again, everyone, and welcome back to Reddit Aliens. I'm John, and as always, thank you so much for being here. A good topic? Let's do it. What's your creepiest, most unnerving story? Please remember to like, share, and subscribe. Back in college, I used to take naps on my friend's futon while he was in class because it was comfortable. Well, one day I doze off around noon, but I fall asleep and I hear the door open. Thinking it's my friend, I attempt to roll over to say hi, but for some reason I couldn't move. I opened my eyes and I could see somewhat hazily, which didn't concern me as much as the fact that there was now someone standing at the door. What really frightened me was that the person from my peripherals was a shadow, like a silhouette of a man around 7 feet tall. He slowly lumbered toward me, and I panicked. I tried to roll off the futon, but it felt like my body weighed a ton, as it took extreme effort just to twist my head. As I'm moving at the pace of a sloth, I see the thing around the table that was the only obstacle between me and him, and I scream at the top of my lungs as a last-ditch effort to effing move. Then I woke up, on the futon, looking at the ceiling. The door was still closed. That's sleep paralysis for you. It's a hazy memory, but it's broken into bits with time. I can't recall it in perfect detail, but I still have the shape of the event. When I was 7 or 8, I was in the shopping center with my sisters, I think, and a childminder. 2 boys in their early teens, around maybe 14 to 16, grabbed somewhere around my shoulder or arms as they were walking past. It sounds like nothing initially. It was weird the way they grabbed me. It was like a child gliding their hand on a radiator, taking the texture, but the fingers curled. There was a definite attempt at a grab. I didn't really have a context for it at the time. I can't recall exactly how it felt, but I remember standing put with my childminder and sisters. My childminder told me at the time that she believed there was something wrong with those boys. I can't remember the exact words, but she all suggested that what they wanted couldn't have been good. A year later, somehow the topic resurfaced when we were at her house, and I was joking about having them beat up by a gang of wrestlers. The consistent thing that remains is the suggestion that the boys were dangerous. It's been bizarre acknowledging it happened all these years, but not really understanding the weight of the event and how disturbing it actually was. A little of my backstory. My mom always takes our cell phones away at night. At the time, I was pretty bummed out, so I had an older iPhone that I hid and used at nights. I live in a 2-story house. I have 3 siblings. 1 sleeps downstairs while the other 2 sleep in our shared room. 2 on the bottom bed bunk, me on the top. So my brothers were also bored, and they decided to go downstairs with my older brother since he had the most electronics, a TV, a Switch, and a PS4. My mom and dad have their room on the other side of the hallway, while I have it on the opposite side. The stairs to go down are in the middle. So anyway, my brothers went downstairs to chill with my brother. I stood upstairs on my bunk bed, just looking at random internet stuff. My parents used to have their door locked, and any time their door was unlocked, it would make a little pop sound. So I was on my phone when I heard the pop. I, hiding a cell phone, tried to hide it under some covers and faced the wall, my back facing the door. I heard footsteps coming out of my parents' door. They started heading to my door. This often happens, but when it does, I'm not afraid ever. I just stay there and wait it out, making fake snoring sounds. Well, this night, a feeling of fear rose through my body. I could feel my body getting colder, so cold. I waited for what felt like 40 minutes waiting for the footsteps to start their way toward my parents' bedroom. I thought it must have been my parents, but this unnerving atmosphere was one of a kind. I then heard the footsteps begin. They headed toward the stairs. I could hear the stairboards creak. I would have excused it and me coming downstairs. I then heard my dad, in a mad voice, arguing with my brothers. I couldn't make out the words since they were muffled. After about 15 minutes of them arguing, I knew it was my dad because I could tell they were speaking Spanish, and my brothers barely speak Spanish to each other. I then heard 2 pairs of footsteps coming up. I wasn't scared this time because I knew who they were. My two brothers came up and sat there on their beds. My other brother even asked if I was awake, and I hushed him because I didn't want my dad to know I was awake. He thought I was sleepy or something, and he went back on his backup phone. I was confused because my dad hadn't come up yet, and my brother was on his phone. I then asked him, "Where's Dad?" He looked at me and said, "What do you mean?" I told him what I had experienced, and he sipped for a second. He then said with a fearful voice that he had also heard footsteps up here. He was coming up the stairs when he saw a black silhouette of a person. He said he told the figure, "Hey Dad," and it never responded. He said he reached out to it, and when his hand met it, it was warm. He then went back downstairs and excused it as him being weird. My brothers said they also heard footsteps, and that's why they decided to come back upstairs early. I was freaked out for that night. The next morning, I asked both my parents if they were up last night, and both of them said they didn't leave the room. I never heard the door close again, and no more of those footsteps come back up, as if they stayed down there. Reddit, is there any logical explanation for this? I would like to hear your thoughts. When I was 24, I was camping by a lake with some friends. We were fishing, which we used to do just to get away and hang out. We had a fire and slept around the fire with sleeping bags. This was summer. What happened was that I remember going to take a piss in the middle of the night, and the guys were asleep as far as I remember. I remember going into the bushes, leaning on a tree, pissing. Next thing I know, I wake up midday naked in a field nearby 5 days later. I managed to hitch a ride with a nice person who drove me to my parents. I don't know what happened, and I don't talk about this a lot. I really just want to forget about it. It was in the 90s. First thing comes to mind is when I was about 19. I fell asleep in the lounge watching TV. I woke up around midnight and started to walk to bed, which meant passing the front door. As I passed the front door, I heard the fly screen door open quietly, and then the door handle start shaking. I quietly tiptoed to the door, gently knocked on the door, and tapped, tap, tap, tap. Bang, 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 they bashed on the door. I yelled out to my older sister and brother-in-law as I switched the porch light on, swung the door open, and dove out to knock them over. Completely empty. The driveway was about 20 meters uphill from the road, and the road was open space as all the houses were built back from the road. Me and the brother-in-law walked down the driveway straight, and there wasn't even a cat on the street. We had a couple crack houses on the street, and the brother-in-law had tools and a Jenny stolen from the back of his workout before, but nothing as brazen as this. And I don't know why I decided to jump out at them. 19, gay, stocky dancer. What the F would I have done to them? 8 years later, I still can't believe how dumb I was. This memory is a little weird for me. I barely remember some parts. I was 12 to 13 years old, and for some reason I was with my uncle and aunt. They have a glass table, a really big one. I saw in that the table around 9 or 10 people, maybe 50 kilograms of food. In the night, I was alone there eating. I heard someone approaching me, but I really don't care. When I feel someone behind me, I turn around looking for my uncle or aunt. We were the only people there. I don't see anyone, so I keep eating. Then in the wall in front of me, I saw a shadow. I turn around again, no one there, and then my eyes back to the wall. Something, I don't know what was that thing, starts falling down really slowly, and my eyes just see the move of that thing. Now I'm typing this as I remember. It was something black but weird form. That thing touched the table and the glass just fell down in micro pieces. I know this because I was wearing shorts and nothing happened to me. I was frozen, and I feel something touch my back and move me from all the pieces of glass. My uncle and aunt heard it, and we never found that black thing. We started to look for someone and nothing, fortunately. They don't blame me, but it was really weird. I had just moved to London, and it was my first night in our tiny one-bedroom garden flat in Camden. We had driven up from Spain and arrived early evening. We took our dogs to the nearby park and played fetch for an hour or so to tire them out. I was tired, so I went to bed quite earlier, 9:30. At 11:30, I wake up to the squeaking of a door slowly opening. I turned to check if my husband was up and around, but he was laying quietly next to me, with a questioning look on his face. I think both of us were probably wondering if the walls were thin and maybe it was the neighbor's door upstairs. Then we hear, probably wondering if the walls were thin, some careful footsteps on the cheap laminate floor. The dogs were so exhausted, they continued sleeping. My husband jumped up and screamed, "I have a weapon," while I screamed, "I've dialed emergency services." Bluff, of course, as I didn't even know the number of emergency services and was pretty sure it wasn't 911. We opened the bedroom door to see the back door of our flat wide open and the security light on in the back. We never ever forgot to lock our back door again. Yeah, vacations, especially when you rent like an Airbnb or Vrbo or something like that, first night's always a little unsettling, different sounds and adjusting, so creepy, yeah. When I was about 20, I was home from university during the summer. We lived on a main road in a large town, and it was just me and my mom in a house that night. I was always an early riser and often got up between 5 and 6. This one time it must have been around 5:15. I'd gotten up, turned on the lights downstairs, and sat down in the living room with a cup of tea. Suddenly, there was a very firm knock at the front door. The dog started barking, and without questioning the obscurity, I went to the bay window to see who had knocked. Before me was a short, scraggly-looking man in a high-vis coat. His head snapped to look at me, blood covering his face and dripping down onto his coat. I went out to the hall where my mom had appeared at the top of the stairs. After some silent, confused gesturing about his nose, he knocked again. I opened the door ever so slightly and he asked how I could help. With little coherence or clarity, he pleaded for some money so he could get a train to a nearby town. He explained he had just been walking across the blank fields on the other side of town, but more importantly, the other side of the train station, where he was set upon by 3 men who beat him up. Through the blood, it looked like his nose was pretty broken. However, his story had meant he had walked nearly 4 miles through the night, nose bleeding profusely, and likely past the train station, and ended up, for whatever reason, on our doorstep at 5:15 a.m. We had no cash. This did not sit well with the man who pleaded we look. I explained that I think we should take him to the hospital, at which he became agitated and asked again for money. I explained that his nose did not look good, and they might be able to help him, but he refused. My mom had come down at this point and intervened with an offer to take him to the station, where they might be able to help him arrange travel. We were both silently thinking we needed to get this person away from us. I closed the front door as we got sorted, and then we all clambered into the car. He absolutely stank and made breathing in the confines of my mom's polo difficult. Given his unpredictable demeanor, I sat in the middle back seat as my mom drove with a set of keys angled out of my fist. It was silent during the entire 5-minute trip to the station. When we arrived, he said thanks, got out, and walked off. We never found out what his true nature or story was, or what happened to him after that, but we're fairly sure his story about a bloody nose was completely made up. I often wonder if he had been committing some other crime when he was caught out and beaten, then tried to feed us a story to get sympathy. Either way, the whole situation was hella creepy. A month ago, me and a friend went out at 9 p.m. to buy cigarettes. No one is allowed to go out after 8 p.m., so it's that rare to find an open store illegally. So we walked a couple of minutes. We saw a cop car coming in that close, we couldn't run away. They were friendly. They asked what we're doing at this time. Here, we told him that we were going home. We kept looking for stores anyway. Unfortunately, all closed. So, on our way home, we saw a car coming that far away. We expected it's the same cop car. So we turned right onto another path. On our way walking, we saw that car behind us. It was coming toward us. I told my friend it's not the cop car, but this one is kind of suspicious. We kept walking. The car came that close. We thought it was parking. Suddenly a guy opened the car door and said calmly with a creepy voice, "Hey, come here for a sec," with a bottle of wine in his hand. Luckily for me and my friend, we were thinking of the same tactic, walking normally until we reached the next turn, which is 3 meters away. I kept it as normal conversation by answering, Sorry, I couldn't hear you. What did you say? And we ran as fast as we could when we reached it. He chased us for like 30 seconds, and the scariest thing was that bottle being thrown that neared my head. I swear to God, I never ran that fast. As a teen, I was at my dad's home one night with a friend. My dad was at his girlfriend's, relevant only because he was infuriated with me after I spooked and asked him to come home. The friend and I were relaxing, watching TV in the living room, when suddenly we heard a back door open and shut. We looked at each other and immediately bolted to the front door, which was only a few feet away. We weren't expecting anyone and knew something wasn't right. We got in my car, drove off while calling my dad, and waited for him to come home. Adult me wishes I would have kept a visual on the house once driving away to take note of anyone coming or going, but I could only focus on getting the heck out of Dodge. Anyway, nothing was stolen or in disarray when my dad got home, so it all remains a mystery, but it sure scared the absolute hell out of me at the time. There was a time back in high school where my group mates and I finished making our project that was done in a cathedral. I can't remember what it was about. During that time, I had no idea how to commute, riding in public jeepneys for transportation, then you just pay for a fee. So I had to call for a taxi, but I was too shy to call for one, until a taxi just stopped in front of me, and an old guy asked me to go in. I was so naive at the time, so I got in without hesitation. He asked me where I should go, and I told him that I'd be stopping at our local mall, which was close to our home. He asked me again where my home was, and I told him I had no idea for the address, but I knew how to get there. As we drove along, I was searching for money in my bag, and I found that I didn't have enough money for that ride. The driver held my thigh, and he told me it was free, but luckily I took my secret money from my secret pocket in my bag and was able to pay the full amount when I got home. When I got home, he asked me if my parents were there, but luckily my aunt came out and was able to pick me up by the gate. I got out and the driver drove away.